inspired by real-life events. Imran grew up in a quiet suburban edge of Rangpur where life never rushed, yet somehow always felt like it was chasing something invisible. And from childhood, he learned a strange truth that people around him rarely said out loud, that survival often mattered more than dreams, and dreams were something you only talked about when you had enough comfort to afford disappointment. And his father was a disciplined man working long hours in a small shop, returning home late with tired eyes but never complaining, while his mother carried the emotional weight of the household, always balancing hope and fear in the same breath. And Imran grew up watching this silent struggle every single day, shaping him into someone who understood responsibility earlier than joy. And he was not extraordinary in school, not the brightest, not the weakest, just someone who observed everything quietly, noticing how people smiled differently when they were pretending, and how silence often meant deeper answers than words. And as he grew older, he started feeling a restlessness inside him, a desire to break out of the predictable cycle he saw in his surroundings. And after completing his studies, he was suddenly faced with a decision that would silently define his entire future. Because he had two paths in front of him. One was a secure local job with fixed income, predictable routine, and a life that everyone called stable. And the other was a risky startup opportunity in the city where nothing was guaranteed except uncertainty, and many around him told him to choose safety because stability meant respect. But something inside him resisted that idea, as if his life was meant for something he could not yet see clearly. And one evening, he sat with his father outside their small home, watching the slow movement of people on the street, and he asked quietly, "Abu, what if I fail, if I take the risky path?" And his father paused for a long time before replying, "Failing is not the worst thing, Imran. The worst thing is never knowing what you could have become." And those words settled deep inside him, like a quiet storm. And days later, he made his decision to join the startup, stepping into a world that felt both exciting and terrifying. And the first few months were nothing like what he imagined, because the office was small, resources were limited, the team was young and inexperienced, and every day felt like a struggle against invisible walls. And Imran quickly realized that ambition without structure creates chaos, and passion without direction creates exhaustion. And many nights, he returned to his rented room feeling drained, questioning whether he had made a mistake that would cost him years of his life. And sometimes he would sit in silence, staring at his phone, thinking about home, about his parents, about the comfort he left behind. And yet something always pulled him back to continue, as if giving up would erase something important inside him. And his closest colleague Farhan often stayed late with him, and they would talk about failures, ideas, and fears. And one night, while looking at unfinished project files, Imran joked softly, "If this startup survives, we either become successful or we become a story people tell about what not to do." And they both laughed. But beneath that laughter was exhaustion that no one fully admitted. And as months passed, the startup entered its most difficult phase because funding delays started affecting salaries. Clients became unpredictable, and pressure slowly turned into silent tension inside the team. And Imran found himself becoming the person who tried to hold things together emotionally, even when everything was falling apart practically. And he would tell others, "We just need a little more time," even when he wasn't fully sure of it himself. And during this period, his family at home also began facing subtle difficulties. his father's health slowly weakening due to years of continuous work. Though no one wanted to make it a serious concern yet, and Imran often felt guilty for not being present enough. But he kept telling himself that sacrifice today would build something better tomorrow. Until one day, everything shifted in a way he did not expect. Because he received a call from home late at night, and his mother's voice was unusually unstable. As she said, "Your father collapsed today." And in that moment, the world he had been balancing between ambition and as responsibility suddenly broke into pieces, and he rushed home immediately, traveling through a journey that felt heavier than distance itself. And when he reached the hospital and saw his father lying weak and connected to machines, Imran felt something inside him go completely silent, because the man he had always seen as strong now looked fragile in a way that no child ever feels ready for. And he sat beside him, holding his hand, feeling the weight of years in that single touch. And his father slowly opened his eyes and whispered, "Don't stop your life because of me." And Imran tried to respond, but no words came out, because sometimes emotion becomes too heavy for language. And after a few days of uncertainty and treatment, he returned to the city, carrying a different kind of pain inside him. One that did not show on the surface, but changed the way he looked at everything. And the startup continued to struggle, reaching a point where shutting down almost felt inevitable. And one rainy evening, when the office was nearly empty, Imran sat with Farhan in silence, listening to the rain hitting the glass. And Farhan said quietly, "Maybe this is where most people quit." And Imran replied after a long pause, "Or maybe this is where people either break or become something stronger." And that moment became a turning point for both of them, because instead of walking away, they began rebuilding everything from the ground up. Restructuring plans, rethinking strategies, contacting clients personally, and working longer hours than before, not out of excitement, but out of necessity and belief that failure was not the final answer. And slowly, step by step, the startup began to stabilize. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually, like light returning after a long night, and months turned into years. And Imran began to see the results of persistence that once felt invisible. And the company grew from uncertainty into something structured and reliable. And with that growth came a deeper realization that success does not erase struggle. It only gives it meaning. And one evening, after a long day of work, he stood on the office balcony, looking at the city lights, and remembered everything he had been through. The doubts, the fear, the nights of exhaustion, and the sacrifices that shaped him. And Farhan joined him and said, "We almost gave up many times." And Imran smiled faintly and replied, "Yes, but we didn't. And that difference is everything." And in that quiet moment, he understood that life was never about choosing between easy and hard paths, but about continuing even when clarity disappears, and only faith in effort remains, because every decision carries invisible consequences that only time reveals, and that every struggle carries lessons that only patience understands. And in the end, Imran realized that a person is not defined by the comfort they choose, but by the resilience they build when comfort is no longer available. And as the night wind passed through the city, he thought silently that the real measure of life is not how smoothly it begins, but how meaningfully it continues when everything tests your will to keep going. And that truth stayed with him like a permanent light in the darkness of memory, reminding him that even the hardest paths often lead to the clearest understanding of who you truly are and what you are capable of becoming when you refuse to stop moving forward.